she makes the point. The Mordechai Yoda Baal HaChalom Omarlo. Mordechai knew with Nevuah, as the Mefarshim explained, that there was a Gzeira on the Jewish people, and the reason for the Gzeira. Number one, that they were Mishtachav Elatzelem. They bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar many years before, and that they participated and they enjoyed the party that Achashverosh made. Why is that important? And then his response, Vayikra Mordechai's Bogodov, Vayilbash Sak Va'efer, he puts on sackcloth. Vayetze B'sochoir, Vayizak Za'oka Gedoy L'mora. And he's wailing in Avelus, as it says, Ubechol Medina, Medina, Makom Asher Dvar Melech B'daso Magia, Evel Gadol LaYehudim. There's Avelus, there's mourning, and the Mefarshim point out that mourning is for something that happened already. You don't mourn for something that's going to happen. If a person is chas v'shalom on his deathbed, you don't begin the Avelus until he passes away. Now, there may have been a gezerah on the Jewish people, but it didn't happen yet. So what's the point of the Avelus? And then, as the Megillah says, Esther gets wind of this, and she sends Mordechai clothing. What's the point of that? She knew Mordechai had clothing. She knew that Mordechai had put on sackcloth for a reason. So why is she sending him clothing? Because he doesn't have any? He has plenty, thank God. And Mordechai Weiter refuses. So what was the discussion here? What is Esther telling him? And what is Mordechai refusing? Ke'ein lovei l'shar melech, and he said, I am not interested in clothing. And then he tells her the story, and she explains to her that she has to go to Achashverosh and have a conversation with him. So what does she tell him? She said, I can't go. He doesn't like me so much. He hasn't called me for a while. It's dangerous. And as I heard from Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, she gave him 4 halachic reasons why she was not able to go to Achashverosh. Number 1, he says, first of all, he don't like me anymore, so it's not going to work. Number 2, it's a sakana to go to the king when you haven't been called. And even he would bring a chuvas radvaz, even if it would be a suffix sakana, you're not mechuyev to endanger your own life to save somebody else's life. And the other 2 reasons go to the relationship, the marital relationship that she had with Achashverosh, which until then would have been ba'ones, and now it would be baratzon if she is willingly going to him. And the 4th reason was that whereas until now, since her relationship with Achashverosh was one of ones, she could continue to stay married to Mordechai. But now that it would be baratzon, it was a vadati, she would now lose her marriage to Mordechai. And Mordechai does not respond to any of these reasons. He just says, Al tedami b'nafshech lehimalet beis hamelech mikol haYehudim. Don't think you'll get away with it. The lady's talking reason. Respond. Answer. Focus on her reasons. Don't think you get away with it. Seems to be a very short and abrasive answer without really responding to her concerns. And then he tells us something else. He says, listen, Revach v'atzola yamad laYehudim mimakom acher. The Jewish people is going to be saved. And either you will help or you're gone. Kiyim hacharesh tacharishi ba'es hazos. So the question is, what is the double hacharesh tacharishi? And the Mefarshim explain, Medrash says, if you're quiet now, you will forever be quiet, or as the expression goes, speak now or forever hold your peace. If you talk now, you do what you got to do, fine. And if not, at ubeisavich tovedu. How did Mordechai know that? She was living as the queen of the one king who ruled over the entire world. Nobody knew she was Jewish. Maybe the Jewish people would be killed, but why is that? Why was Mordechai so sure that she would not have any ability to exist if the decree against the Jewish people was carried out? How did he know that? And the explanation of this is based on the Malbim, based on the Nesivos in his Pirush Megillah Storim, based on things that I heard from Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, is that a person has to understand when difficult things happen to him, you have to try to understand why it happened. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and everything that happens to a human being is decreed, if something like this happens to the Jewish people, it was not about the letters that Haman sent that were the decree that would destroy the Jewish people. That, he was only the executioner. The executioner is not in a position to make something happen or to stop it from happening unless he gets orders. And the fellow who runs the electric chair or puts somebody to death, he is the, as the Chavis Avavas explains, he is the least, or he has the least power to change anything. He's just doing the job. He's flipping the switch or whatever the case may be. And that was Haman. And that was Mordechai Yoda Eskol Asher Naseh. He understood what's happening not down here. He understood that upstairs there was a Gzeira, and the Gzeira had been coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Jewish people were now Chayiv Misa. And he knew, and this is the Nesivos' point over here, that the way to respond is not as people usually do. And the Navi Yeshayahu gives a mashal that when you have a stick that hits a dog, so the dog will chase the stick. What are you chasing the stick for? The stick is only a weapon in the hands of the one who's wielding it. The one who is hitting the Jewish people is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lachzar achar hasibos, to go try to ishtadlis and to, maybe I should talk to this politician, to that politician, you're missing the boat. That's not what it's all about. And that is why Mordechai put on sak va'efer. Mordechai was an oval because this was a decision that was made already. Since HaKadosh Baruch Hu had decided to, at this point, destroy the Jewish people, it was a done deal. It was over. We were just a Baharag Baraglev. We were not, right? We were zombies. We were done. It was sak va'efer. It was bechi u'mispaid. It was Evel Gadol HaYehudim. It was Avelis. It was after. But Mordechai knew as well that afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavar shel adam, even if a sword, if a person has a gzeira chas v'shalom, whether it's cancer or some other terrible thing that's happening to him, al yimna atzve me'arachamim, the whole point of the Gezerah was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a relationship with you. Yainasi b'chag ve'asela, the Shlomo HaMelech says in Shir HaShirim, when the yoina, when the dove of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the cleft of the rock, when Klal Yisrael is between the proverbial rock and the hard place, the purpose is Hashmeini es koilech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want a relationship with you. I want to talk to you. And therefore Mordechai understood that the only way to overturn this Gzeira was not by running to the politicians and not by having any kind of political activity, which is the normal thing that a person wants to do. But you have to talk to Hashem, and that's why by Yilbashak Ve'efer, as they did in the days of Nineveh, Vayetze b'soichoyir, Vayizak ze'aka gedoy l'mara. And when Esther sends him clothing, he is not interested in the clothing. Because the clothing means, get dressed, kid, let's go into the... I'm not interested in going, Ein love b'shar melech. I'm not talking to Achashverosh. He is not my bar plukta. He's not the one who I have to influence. He's not the one whose mind I have to change. And Sakva Efer Yutzal Rabbah means that Mordechai had a campaign going, that every Jew should be swept up by this awareness that it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu who is making this decree, and he is the one to whom we have to talk and with whom we have to rebuild our relationship. And therefore, he wasn't interested in the clothing that Esther Amalka sent him, because that's not where he was going. But what did he tell Esther? And this the Malbim points out, and this is very relevant for every single person in life. Very often, we wind up in places where we don't really expect to be. Okay, so you read all these stories about the guy who wound up in some random airport, and he was makar of the fellow sitting next to him, and he shouldn't have been there because both of them missed their planes. That's nice, and it's true, and it's good. But the real thing is, every single person in life is given a skill set, is given a situation in family where he works, where he learns, who he marries, what his kids look like. Many different things happen to a person in life. Many of them are not in our control. And if something happens that is so weird and so strange, it is only that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the Mesabeh Vasibos, is making that happen. Here you have a Melech, Achashverosh, who was no less of an anti-Semite than his friend Haman. And the Jewish people, not exactly persona grata. And this Jewish girl, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives her beauty and charm, and she winds up being the wife of the most powerful man in the world. And that's what Mordechai tells her. What are you doing there? What are you doing there? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put you in this position? Clearly he put you in this position because he wants something out of you. And im hacharesh tacharishi ba'es hazos, if you don't speak up, then tacharishi for the future. You're living in the king's palace. Who says you're going to be found out? You don't belong there. A Jewish girl has no business being there, not because we're not allowed to, but because they're not going to put up with it. And if it happened that until now, Achashverosh never figured out who she was and why she was there, he will. Because it's not a natural occurrence that you belong there. And the next point is that a person has to do his ishtadlus. So he didn't tell her, listen, okay, you don't have to do anything. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts a person in this world and is the Chavis Avavas discusses in the 4th parak of Shara B'Tachan, he wants us even, Adam Rishon in Gan Eden was required to do Ishtadlus. Why? That's a discussion for a different time. Kadosh Baruch Hu does not want you to sit with your legs crossed and wait for everyone to serve you. You have to daven, that's true. But a person who chas v'shalom has an illness, he has to daven. But he also has to go to the doctor, because that is the way Hashem set up the world, that he wants people to do what they do. Why? So that whatever happens to you won't look like a nace. That is the point of Ishtadlus. And Mordechai tells Esther, listen here, I'm not getting out of these clothes. I am going to continue to daven. And I'm going to make the entire Klal Yisrael daven. But your part, your Ishtadlus, your effort on the behalf of the Jewish people is the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put you in that place. And you got to do it. But you have to remember that without the tefillah, whatever you're going to do is like a person who's talking to the executioner and trying to get a stay when the governor or the president or whoever it is who can do that is not in the picture. It's a waste of time. Because if you're not going to do it, atu beis avich tovedu, why beis avich? That's a different discussion for a different time. Now, she gave him 4 reasons why she couldn't go in. As we mentioned, there was a sakana, and the king didn't like her, and there was now znus barotza, and she couldn't be staying married to Mordechai, and Mordechai responds, Al tedami benafshech limoled beis hamelech mikol Yehudim. Don't think you'll get away with it. Answer. Respond to her reasons. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explained, he said, very often when a person does something, he can give a lot of reasons. But the reasons are not what count. He wants to do it because he wants to do it. I still remember every year he was very makpid that Bochum shouldn't leave the yeshiva before Purim. This was one of his things. Don't leave before Purim, don't leave before Rosh Hashanah. And I remember he was standing at the bima and he said, you know, a Bochum comes to me and he explains to me that he has to leave before Purim. I ask him why. And he gives me a reason, and Reb Chaim starts to pound on the stender. A goyel nefesh mamish. In English, it's disgusting what he told me. So he says, what am I going to do? I'm going to explain to him why the reason is absolutely ludicrous. He says, no. He'll give me another 7 reasons why he has to go. Because he wants to go, because he wants to go, not because of the reasons. The reasons are just the window dressing. And we know in life, so often when we don't want to do something, we have a lot of reasons why it's not right, and it's not this, and it's not that, and it has nothing to do with anything. We don't want because we don't want. Or we're too lazy. And Mordechai, as Reb Chaim explained, tapped into this refusal or hesitation on the part of Esther. He says all the reasons are not relevant. It's because in your heart of hearts, you think that even if something bad happens to the Jewish people, I'll somehow get out of it. And that is what Mordechai tells her. It's not so. You're only there for a reason. And for us, very many different situations in life. Why am I here? Not in this airport, and not on this bench, and not on this bus. But why am I here where I am with the skill sets I have, with the family, with the background, with everything that comes along with it? What does God want from me here? And if I do it, I'll be okay. And if not, you're wasting your time. As we just learned the Rashi, for those of you who got till Daf Yud Aleph, above Metzia, the Rashi brings that there were 2 Leviim, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgoida and Rabbi Yeshua. And one of them was one of the Meshorerim, one of the singers in the Beis HaMikdash, and the other one was Min HaMeshoyarim. He was in charge of the doors and the gates, and one wanted to do the other one's job, and he said, no, because if you do the wrong job, you're chayiv misa. And there's a point here. All of us are working for God in God's world. If we do what we got to do, we have a right to live. If we're busy taking what we need or what we think is we would like to do, God may say, listen, it's all nice, but I don't need you around. It's a scary thought. In any event, once Esther understood this, so she was ready to go. And she said, okay, I'm going to daven. Gamani v'narosai yotzim kain. We'll daven, we'll fast, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that relationship with us. And even though it means going into the king after 3 days of fasting, okay? But you got to look your best. I have some bachrim who ask me now if they could have a drink at 11 o'clock, they're not looking their best. Can you imagine when you have the fate of the Jewish people resting on your meeting with the king? But she realized that Achashverosh was nothing more than the guy who flips the switch. And she had to talk to Hashem. And as the Gra explains, right? Everyone knows the Hamelech, every Hamelech that it says in the Megillah is a reference to Hashem. And after Haman was killed, right after he was hung, Vatosef Esther Vatidaber El Hamelech Vatipol Ifnei Ragla Vateif Vatiskanen Lo. And the Goin over here explains that all of these expressions, Vatosef, Vatidaber, Vatipol, Vateif, right? She added, or she went more, and she fell, and she cried. Vatischanin are all parts of davening. It's a reference to Psukkah de Zimra, to Kriyishma, to Tachnun, to Shemon Esrei. Because even when it was all over, she understood that the main event is her davening. And when Haman comes to Mordechai to give him a ride, he doesn't say, woo, he's the man. Maybe we'll have a word with him. No, he goes to daven, as the Gemara says. Because Haman wasn't the one who he had to convince. And then after the ride is over, Vayashem Mordechai and Chazal say that he was shoved l'sakav v'tanis. What do you mean? We're done. You're not done at all. And the mashal is about a fellow who is giving his wife the silent treatment. And what are you going to do? She wants a relationship with him. He comes home for supper. She decides no supper tonight. She doesn't say anything. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, finally 10 o'clock, he loses it. He says, well, what's with supper? She says, so you do know how to talk. Okay. So she prepares supper for him. She gives it to him. Then he gives it a silent treatment again. What was the point of the whole exercise over here? The point was that we want a relationship, right? So now that you got your supper, you're gone. It doesn't go that way. So whether it was before, whether it was during, whether it was after, Mordechai and Esther both knew, like the Gemara says, Rav Masna and the Rambam Paskins like this in the Hakdama to the Yad HaChazaka, that the reason why we listen, you got to see this Rambam. It's at the beginning of the Rambam and the Yad HaChazaka before Mada. After he lists all the mitzvahs, he doesn't give a reason for any mitzvah, with the exception of Megillah. And he says the reason we read the Megillah is that a person should know, and we should teach our children, that when you have a problem and you daven to Hashem, He answers you. That's the purpose of the Megillah. And the emes is that the Rambam, even though the Mekayros don't bring it, it's a Gemara. The Gemara says on Daf Yud Aleph in the Pasach La Pischa Mehacha, all of the things, and the Gemara brings from Rav Masna. And Rav Masna says, Rav Masna Amar Mehacha, Ki mi goy godo, ashalo elokim krovim elov, kashem elokeinu b'chol kareinu elov. That's the purpose of laning the Megillah. Mi goy gadol ashelo elokim krovim elov, as the Sfas Emes explains, Elokim, even when we are suffering from midas adin, We know it's Krovim Elav, as the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel says. Hashem is sitting right there. Hashem is sitting on his chair waiting for us to come, because that was the purpose of the whole tzara. Lo Elokim, it's Midas Adin, Krovim Elav, and we get it. Kashem Kavaya, in other words, Midas Arachamim, we understand, Vaya Lekenu, that we understand that our Lekenu, the Midas Adin that we are experiencing, is Havaya, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Midas Arachamim. And as the Targum Yonasan ben Uzziel says over there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits for us, and he answers us. But that is when we understand that the Yeshua is coming from him. And that is what we say in the Lamanatzeach Alayel Sashachar. And she says, Keli, Keli, Lama Azavton, excuse me, Belekai Ekra Yoimam V'loi Saneh. I call to you by day and you don't answer. V'layla, but by night, V'loi Dumili. Then you're not quiet. You don't ignore me. When it's Ekra Yoimam, when things are by day, I see it all. I got it worked out. I got it all figured. It's Yaimam. Hashem says you got it figured. Like the Chavis Avava says, you got it all figured out. Work it out on your own. You know what you're doing, so go ahead. Then it's V'loi Saneh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't respond to you, because if you have other ways of solving your problems, I'm not the address. Take care of it. Let's see. On the other hand, when it's V'layla, when things are dark, when you don't see a clear path, when it's one big mess, and it's hard, and it's difficult, and the future is bleak, then you call out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then v'loi dumili. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not, loishiketz anis evyon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not ignore a person who reaches out to him with his awareness of his poverty. And that is what we say, this is more al derech hadrash, Rachik mishuasi divrei shagasi, that's the next pasuk. My tefillah is distance from my Yeshua. You have distance before and distance after. Before you start, the Yeshua is so far away, I'm starting to daven, I don't know where I am. But once the Yeshua comes, it also has to be Rachik mishuasi, that you continue davening after the Yeshua, because the purpose of the Yeshua was to establish that relationship. Purpose of the tzara was not to punish you. Purpose of the tzara was to bring you about to establish that relationship. So what's the point if you got your dinner from your wife and then you start to ignore her again, which is what we do, right? We daven to Hashem, he takes care of our tzara, and say, okay, God, I'm good now. I'm good. I'll see you when I don't need to bother you, really, so I'll talk to you when I need you. Huh? But that's the point over here. It's Rachik mishuasi, before and after. And these are some of the lessons that we learn from the Megillah. Sefer Kava Yashar, one of the Kadmonim writes that if a person has a tzara, and everybody has things in his life which he needs, which bother him specifically, Taanis Esther is the day when he says, take a little time, yikach le pnai, take a little time, say Perek Chav Beis in Tehillim, which was the tefillah that Esther said when talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Rosh says in Masechta Taanis that the reason we have Taanis Esther is for the rachamim that we request from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every single one of us should take the day, spend the time to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically saying this kapitel and expressing in your own words what you need. And from the tzaras that everybody has, you should have a Yeshua, and all of us should enjoy the simcha of Purim, La'ihudim, Ha'isa Oira, Simcha, Sasa, and Vikar.